Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio. Your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Has your loved one gone from warm and loving to cold and distant? Could it be frontotemporal dementia? I'm Tracy Cram Perkins, and our show today is Dementia Home Care. I'm a 4-time dementia caregiving survivor and the author of Dementia Home Care, How to Prepare Before, During, and After. Joining me today is returning guest Allyson Schrier, president and co-founder of Zinnia TV. She cared for her husband, Evan, through his journey with frontotemporal dementia. Welcome back, Allyson.
Tracy, it's so good to see you again.
I am so excited that we got together here today. We were talking previously about your journey, and you are back here today. And I want to know, how did your journey with FTD begin?
The journey with FTD began as a mystery, I guess I would say, because my husband did not have the symptoms that we typically associate with dementia. So we typically think of Alzheimer's disease, where somebody is suddenly not able to find their way places that they once were very easily able to find. Memory issues, right, that we typically associate with Alzheimer's disease. Mom can't seem to remember things any longer. Evan didn't have any of those kinds of symptoms. The first thing that I noticed was that he just became kind of disengaged. So things that he had been interested in doing, he was less interested in doing. And he didn't want to do things that he didn't really want to do. He started behaving much like a teenage boy, I would say, that if there was a chore that had been his chore and something that he was responsible for, he would not do it. And if I would ask him to please make sure that you do get the lawn mowed because that's like your thing, he would say, yeah, I don't really want to do that. And I'd be at kind of a loss. So he was less interested in parenting. He was less interested in being a full partner in the marriage and more interested in kind of just doing his own thing.
That had to be very difficult for you. How difficult was it for you to get a diagnosis for Evan?
Sure. So let me just address the difficult part about just life, right? So what I just described, like somebody who's becoming disengaged, they're not that interested in participating in family events, where does your mind go? And for me, it went to, what is wrong with our relationship? So what have I done? Is there a problem with our marriage? I was convinced that he was involved in a relationship with somebody else because, for example, there was a Christmas dinner, where we had some relatives coming over. And Evan's parents were staying with us, in addition to some other relatives that would be joining us. And Evan was supposed to pick up Chinese food because though I was making a full Christmas dinner, we wanted to also serve Chinese food because it's something that the kids loved and it would be sort of like a fun, different thing. Evan disappeared during the day. And I asked his mom, where did Evan go? And she said, I have no idea. He said he was going out because I'd been out for a walk. He just sort of disappeared. And so I tried phoning him, texting him, emailing him all day long, nothing. And then he finally showed up at about, we were serving dinner at 5:30. He showed up at about 6. And I said, where's the Chinese food? That's the first question. Where's the Chinese food? And he said, oh my gosh, I forgot the Chinese food. And I said, where have you been? And he said, I'm embarrassed to tell you. So I dragged him into the bedroom and I said, okay, who is she? Like, what's going on? Christmas Day? You're gone all day long. Where have you been? It turns out that he was working at Microsoft at the time, and that he'd spent the entire day at Microsoft printing off Dungeons and Dragons adventures. Right. So he was making a lot of poor decisions. He unilaterally decided that he was going to become a ski patroller, which meant that he was going to have to work every weekend. So in addition to working during the days, he was also during the weekend. We had an infant at the time. So he wasn't diagnosed until my kids were 12 and 15, but I'm going all the way back to when the 10 years previously, where he was doing things like coming home and saying, guess what? The first one was, I'm going to graduate school. This particular guy has said that I can enter his program. I don't even need to apply. And I was like, wait a minute, you're the family breadwinner. What do you mean you're going to graduate school? He went to graduate school. He wound up not being able to complete the program. But additionally, then like the following year, I've decided to become a ski patroller. And I'm like, what? I'm home all day, every day with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And now you're going to be gone every day of the weekend as well. Like, shouldn't I be a part of this conversation? So anyway, these kinds of changes that cause you to think like, why are you disengaging from our relationship? Was it hard to find a diagnosis? Absolutely. We didn't start looking for a diagnosis until 2006, when Evan was not able to complete the PhD program that he had unilaterally decided to engage in. Couldn't complete the program. And he started feeling really bad about himself because he was just unable to get the work done, because he couldn't stay focused on anything. And so he went to, that's when he started seeking help on his own, recognizing that it was something about him. And so he went to see a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist diagnosed him, as being depressed. And like, yeah, of course, I just failed a PhD program. And she put him on some medications to help with depression. And she said that she suspected that what he actually had was something called adult onset ADHD. And that's why he was unable to be focused. And so she put him on meds to try and help with focus. So that was 2006. We didn't get a diagnosis until 2012, like an accurate diagnosis. So for 6 years, we were seeing therapists, marriage counselors, each of us seeing different therapists, seeing people together, him seeing a psychiatrist. Altogether, I would say that, and in that time, we also saw a neuropsychologist to do full cognitive testing. He saw a neurologist. He had an MRI that was incorrectly read. So 6 years to get a diagnosis, which would have been about 10 years from onset of symptoms.
Okay, now I have a question for you. How did you deal with your own emotions during this time? That couldn't have been easy.
Well, I would say that my prominent, the greatest emotional difficulty that I was having at this time was just anger. I was so frustrated all the time. Like, what do you mean you don't feel like shoveling the driveway? Like, what are you talking about? The car can't get out and I'm busy with the kids. What? And that his response was, yeah, but I'm right in the middle of a game. Like, he's playing a computer game and he can't stop doing that thing. And when he was having difficulty at graduate school, for instance, he would talk about what the problem was, what he needed to accomplish. And I would say, okay, look, I am a mastermind at organizational stuff. Like, I can schedule my way out of any situation. So I'm going to help you. I'm going to sit by your side. You're going to describe it. I'm going to write a list. And you know what? I'll break it into little sticky notes. And I'm just going to hang them right here on the wall. As soon as you finish this task, do this one, then do this one. And I would check in on him a couple of hours later and he's playing a computer game and nothing has gotten accomplished. And so I was just tearing my hair out. And I would say that that's my greatest regret during this time, is just that I was so angry all the time. And I think that for my kids, that's probably one of the most difficult things as well. I know that they were curious about, they were fearful that mom and dad were going to get a divorce, that mom and dad weren't getting along. So how did I deal with the emotions? I think by disengaging myself, by finding other things for me to do. I still stayed very focused on the kids, but I would walk a lot. I am one of those people who doesn't eat her frustration. I don't eat, and so I lost a lot of weight. I was nervous and anxious. I started seeing a therapist because I wanted desperately to save my marriage. And it was that relationship with a therapist that actually led us to a diagnosis, because I eventually just had this whiteboard moment with her where I said, okay, so look, so here's what this week was like. And I laid out all of the ineffectiveness that I was witnessing in my household, and the nutty stuff, because now further into the diagnosis, now I'm talking more about like 2010, 2011, I guess it probably was, that his behaviors had become more kind of outrageous. So some of the things that he was saying, things that he would do, I would leave him home with the kids while I went out to book club, for instance, and I would come back and find that the kids were still unbathed. They're still in their day clothes. It's 10 o'clock at night. They're running around like lunatics, and he's playing a computer game, or he's watching porn, and the kids are in his office playing Legos and he's sitting there watching porn. Right. Or like eating family meals. We're eating dinner and he will look up from his plate and look at me and say, I'm very horny. Let's go upstairs. And I'm like, what is going on? Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so are those typical early warning signs if people are wondering about their family member? I mean, is that typical or is that not typical, or do you know?
I would say, so now I'm talking about like 10 years into symptoms, right?
Okay.
I think that we got diagnosed very later than many people do. Although it's not unusual for it to take time for people to get a diagnosis for FTD, because the way that it works is that it mostly impacts younger people. So people in their 30s and 40s are probably like the sweet spot for FTD. People do get diagnosed later on, but that's typically when symptoms begin. And because symptoms don't begin like dementia, like what we think of as dementia, which I described earlier, meaning that they're having memory issues, they can't find their way places, they're misplacing things. Because those symptoms don't exist, when you start seeing healthcare providers, they don't jump to dementia. They jump to the things that my husband's providers jumped to, which is like ADHD, depression, anxiety. And so therefore, it's not unusual that it takes some time to get a diagnosis. And again, because these folks are usually pretty young. And for the family members, you'd never think that it's dementia. Like I described earlier, it just seems like there's some kind of problem in the relationship. So rather than think about some sort of physiological mental health issue, we think of things as as other types of mental health issues, like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. There are all kinds of places that people go before they land at FTD.
All right, so now you're at this point. Did you find any tools that helped you? Because you said the sticky notes weren't working. Was there anything that helped you cope with and keep Evan on track?
No, there wasn't.
Okay.
So, especially pre-diagnosis. So bear in mind pre-diagnosis, one of the things that was really irritating for me was that he had been incorrectly diagnosed as having ADHD. We had lots of friends who have ADHD. They have meds, they use journals, they use sticky notes, right? They set up strategies to be able to succeed. And one of the things that was so frustrating is that none of the strategies worked. Like, you're taking your meds, I'm doing sticky notes, I'm writing a great big calendar, it's right here on the wall. How come you're still not able to do anything? So I was not successful. And as I said, he did wind up getting kicked out of his PhD program. He was able to get, he was working for a while I was noticing things at home. I thought, I guess he's just better at work, because here he doesn't accomplish anything, but he must be accomplishing things at work, but he wasn't. So he lost a job, he got another job, he lost that job. And he started noticing that there were things that mistakes he shouldn't have been making, mistakes that were just like entry level. He was a pretty high level software engineer, and he was making mistakes that a poorly skilled junior engineer would make. And so that was when he recognized that maybe there was an issue. Now, once we had a diagnosis and the doctors explained to him, like, you need to listen to Allyson, what I learned is that I could just ask him to do one thing. And then when he accomplished that one thing, then it's time to do the other thing. So giving somebody a list of things to do is not going to work. You have to chunk things into little tiny pieces and wait for that first success, and then you do the next piece.
Okay, actually, that's a great bit of advice for anybody out there. Again, that I can't imagine the emotional upheaval that did for your kids. What was it like for them?
It was awful for them. It was awful.
Yeah.
One of the things that is also characteristic of FTD is that the person is still so physically capable. And I would say that this is true for some other dementias as well, that when it's a younger onset diagnosis, is that they are still so physically capable, and yet they can no longer do things that were once incredibly easy. Things like, at the time, my husband had an iPod, remember those? Mm-hmm. And he kept running out of memory on his iPod. So every day he would remove music and put more music on and shuffle things around. He would spend hours and hours and hours. And every time that it didn't quite go right, he would get, pardon me, he would get extremely frustrated and start screaming, like literally screaming. Doing things on the computer, like games that he should have been able to play, that he could no longer play successfully. And his response was that he would start banging on the table. He would start shouting at the screen, swearing at the screen. And so for my kids, there was the upheaval of dad responding this way. And because they were more familiar with the technology that he was trying to use than I was, I would ask them to help him. And so they would go sit with him. They would fix whatever the issue was that he was having. And you would think that that would solve the problem. But instead, it made him even more irate because he was furious that they could do something that he wasn't able to do. And so there was no winning, right? And so I think that for the kids, that was powerfully frustrating. And then, you know how it is when you're a kid, many kids are embarrassed by their parents, right? Even a perfectly functioning, fairly healthy parent, kids can be embarrassed by their parents. Well, up that about 20 notches, because we would run into situations like, we went to, my older son was in a performance. We went to the performance and Evan needed to use the bathroom. So my younger son took Evan to the bathroom, and Evan didn't go into the stall or the urinal. He just peed all over the floor. And so this is at the school, right? At a school production. And so my son is then grabbing paper towels and cleaning up the floor, and kids are coming and going, and his dad has just urinated on the floor. I mean, how is that for a kid? And once Evan was diagnosed, it was pretty obvious that there was something not right about him. His gait had changed. He was kind of drop jaw, kind of looking around. There was something clearly not right with him. But, my kids, I think, remained proud of him because of the fact that he was still game. He would still go to their events. I remember that there was a day that Eli had a wrestling match, and I wasn't going to be able to go. And so Evan, on his own, walked the 2 miles to the school so that he could watch his son be in a wrestling match. And Eli described like what it felt like for him when he saw his dad walk in the door. This guy who clearly has a lot of stuff going on, and yet he still made it a priority to get there and attend the wrestling match. And at a wrestling match, there's always like 3 matches going on at the same time. And so Eli said he didn't watch the right match, right? He didn't watch the one I was in, but he got there, and that was really important.
Oh, that's fantastic. So stay with us. After the break, we'll continue our conversation with Allyson.
Every great story begins with a vision. At USA Global TV and Radio for years, we've been providing world-class education, entertainment, inspiration, imagination, connections, and hope. Most people don't stay to watch the outro or the credits, but it's the people behind every success, behind every breakthrough, and behind every unforgettable story who matter. The TV show hosts, our guests, our sponsors, our publicists, our production team, our distribution team, our search engine optimization team, and so many more. You're the ones who make the difference. Every great story belongs to the people who bring it to life. Our future looks bright at USA Global TV and Radio, and that's because of you, our loyal fan base all around the world in more than 60 countries. Together, we're making a difference because you matter. USA Global TV and Radio, live streaming to over 60 countries. Voiceover, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Video production and direction, Paul Garcia. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV and Radio on YouTube.
Allyson, before the break, we were discussing how your husband Evan made it to the match. Were there many episodes like that before he couldn't do it?
Yeah. There's another one that I think about. Evan needed an occupation, and I think that this is a huge problem as well with people who have any kind of early onset dementia, is that they suddenly can't work, they can't drive, they can't do so many of the things that they love to do. I remember when Evan and I went for a bike ride, two bike rides that I remember. One that we were riding our bikes and he'd gotten really slow. He was just painfully slow riding his bike. We were going up a hill and I needed to have some momentum to get up the hill. So I rode past him and he got off his bike and threw it down and started screaming because he was so angry that that I was going faster than he was. So we got back on our bikes and I just rode behind him the whole time because I knew that otherwise it was going to be a problem. But I remember another time that we took our bikes out and he just couldn't figure out how to ride a bike. And he said, my bike isn't working. My bike isn't working. And I looked at it and I said, this stupid bike, I can't believe it's not working. That's terrible. And we walked our bikes home. I remember a time that he said that his buttons weren't working. He came into me and he had a button up shirt and he said, my buttons aren't working because he couldn't figure out how to do the buttons anymore. And I responded by saying, oh, I hate when shirts do that. My shirts do that too sometimes. Let's put on a different shirt. So we put on a shirt without buttons. But the situation that I wanted, excuse me, back to the idea of occupation. Sorry, I'm nursing a cold. So since Evan could no longer work as a software engineer, I tried to think of what could he do that would give him some sense of being needed, right? Some sense of importance, some sense of being productive. We live walking distance from a fish hatchery. And so Evan got a job, and this is when he could still ride a bicycle because he'd ride his bicycle there every day. And his job was that he was the guy who fed the fish. And so he had to be there every morning at 6 o'clock. And he would be the guy who fed the fish, which basically meant there's like this shaker above the fish tanks, and he would shake it and get the fish food to come out. And he really liked doing that job. And he identified with being the guy, I'm the guy who feeds the fish. And the thing that made that stop, Tracy, was one day he came home and he said, I'm not going to be the guy who feeds the fish anymore. And I said, why? And he said, because they treat me like I'm stupid. And I think that this is a mistake that many people make when they're communicating with a person who's living with dementia, is that they start talking like there's something really wrong with you. Do you understand? Is this okay? Can you do it this way? And, kind of the upspeak and raising their voice, little baby voice. And anyway, and I mean, we should slow down our speech a bit, because the way that processing speed is damaged through any dementia makes it that words are processed more slowly. So therefore we provide them more slowly, but not to the point where we're being insulting. And I think that that's what happened with Evan, is that he just said, I don't want to be treated this way. So he stopped being the guy who fed the fish. And that was kind of heartbreaking for me.
So I'm going to segue on that empathy. Do you now teach people how to be empathetic and how to talk to people?
I do. Yeah, so a big pivot for me during my time as a caregiver is that I needed a job, because my husband was never going to work again. And so I won't go into the whole trajectory, but where I landed is that I started doing dementia education. And so I studied, did all the bunch of TIPA Snow certifications, and watched videos and read books and started figuring things out. And also I learned myself from doing a lot of things wrong, like that idea of buttoning the shirt, of trying to feel like, what would it feel like? What does it feel like if one day you go to put your shirt on and you can't make it work? Well, I can't imagine that it's about me, right? Because I'm a pretty healthy person. It must be the shirt. If somebody then corrects you and says, oh, for God's sake, it's because you can't remember how to do it anymore, how is that going to make you feel? So that I kind of came to on my own, is really thinking about what would it feel like to be the person who's having these experiences. And as I started studying and learning to be a dementia educator, that was a really big part of it. And I think that that's the first starting place for anybody who is supporting people with dementia, is to think about, what would it be like to be that person? So that's why we don't challenge people's reality. So the shirt buttoning is one part of it, right? But if I ask you, if the person with dementia comes in and says, I would like to have breakfast because I'm hungry, and they've already eaten breakfast, what do I do, right? I have to be in their reality and think about, like, okay, so let's see. They're asking for breakfast. They've already eaten breakfast. If I say to them, you just had breakfast a half an hour ago, how is that going to make them feel? Because their reality is like, no, I did not eat. Wouldn't I remember if I had eaten? So now they're in a position where either they're going to start feeling really bad about themselves, like, what's wrong with me that I don't remember that I've already had breakfast? Or they're going to see me as the problem. Why are you gaslighting me? Because if I'd already had breakfast, I would know that I'd had breakfast. So therefore you're lying. So as the family member who is supporting that person, I look for other ways around this. And one of those might be, you know what, how about if we just start with a cup of coffee, and let me think about what would be the right thing to eat. And so then I get them a cup of coffee, we start talking about something, and we kind of shift away from the conversation about food. Or maybe what I do is I put out a plate with some strawberries on it and say, let's start with this and then see where we go from there.
Okay, now you're leading me back to something else.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. But as the disease progressed, there came a point when Evan had to go into skilled care.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So he didn't start in skilled care. He started in assisted living. With frontotemporal dementia, the transition out of the home often happens sooner than with other dementias, simply because it has become so difficult within the family to continue supporting that person. That's what happened in our household. So I described things like, I come home and Evan is watching porn, or at the dinner table and Evan says I'm horny. The screaming when things weren't working, the accusations, if the kids would touch anything like his CDs, he would just go through the roof. And everybody was walking on eggshells. Everybody was grieving, right? It was, and everything was so unpredictable. You just never knew what was the thing that was going to trigger Evan's behaviors. And bear in mind also, if I may, and I will come back to the moving into long-term care, in our particular situation, it wasn't just the dementia. We were living in a lovely house at the end of a dead-end road on 10 acres of land. I loved the woods. Evan loved the woods. We loved living in this forested setting, but we were not near anything. The kids were going to private schools because Dad had a good job. We were making okay money. Once we knew that there was something going on with Evan, we sold that house and we moved into an apartment so that we could be closer to town. Kids couldn't go to private school anymore. I had no idea what our financial future was going to be. So they had to go to public school. And the only way they could do that is if we moved closer to town where they could walk to school, because I knew that I was going to have to get a job and I wasn't going to necessarily be able to drive them they certainly couldn't be driven to the private school, which was far away. So we left our house, we moved into an apartment, the kids switched schools, Dad lost his job. And then we wound up buying a house. Once we were able to sell our house, we wound up buying a house. The kids were able to then stay in the new schools. So all of these changes are going on, adding to the upheaval within our family. And then Dad's behaviors are becoming more and more erratic. They were scary sometimes. There was one time I remember in particular when he approached me and he went to shove me and he stopped about 4 inches away from my chest. He just stopped. But my gosh, if he had completed that push, I would have gone over. There was a time when he fell downstairs. I took risks, right? I think that a lot of caregivers do. They think that they can keep supporting a person physically when really it's not safe to do so. So I'm 5'7", 120 pounds. My husband was 6 feet and at that point had put on a lot of weight. I would still help him down the stairs by walking backwards myself and moving one foot and then moving his hand on the banister and then moving the other foot. I would put him into a car by lifting him up and shoving him into the car and swinging his legs around because his body did not cooperate as well anymore. So there was a time when he fell down the stairs and landed on top of me and I was trapped underneath him. So all of these things were pointing to the fact that it's probably not really safe for us to continue living together. So that's what precipitated a move. The kids were both in therapy at this point. I was in therapy. Evan was seeing his doctor. All of the medical professionals were like, this is a disaster. You guys cannot continue living together. And the kids therapist said, look, either the kids move out or he does. And for me, that was a no-brainer, right? I couldn't ship my kids off to go live in other places. And so Evan had to go someplace else. And that is what caused us to have him move into assisted living because he could still dress himself as long as he was putting on shirts that didn't have buttons, right? He could still feed himself. He could still use the toilet. So he could still shower. So assisted living, not memory care, was the first step.
So the next question I have is, how did you end up affording all of this? I mean, could you stay married? What happened?
Yeah, that was horrible. So the assisted living was affordable. It was probably about, I think it was about $6,000 a month when he was in assisted living. When he moved into memory care, which was it was less than a year after assisted living that he moved into memory care. And that was over $10,000 a month. And they were going to be raising the rates. Anyway, so I looked at the fact that I had kids who are now 13 and 16. Evan was still so physically healthy because during the years that he wasn't working, he worked out. So he was fit, he was strong, he was young. There wasn't any reason to expect that we would be losing him anytime soon. And when you talk to doctors, which is the question, all caregivers have the question, which is, how long am I going to be doing this? And you hate to be morbid about it. And you hate to think about the fact that at some point this is going to end. But at the same time, you kind of want a sense of, am I financially able to make it through this? And so we would hear, well, typically about 7 years from diagnosis is when the person might pass on. Could be 10 years. There are people who live longer. And so I was terrified, pardon me, that I was not going to be able to afford $10,000 a month for 10 years, potentially. And so I needed to get Evan into a community that would take Medicaid. But the only way to get him into a community that takes Medicaid is for him to be impoverished. And the only way to impoverish him was to get a divorce. And so this was the counsel that I got from our attorneys and our accountants, was that the solution is that you get a divorce, and that we are able to finagle a lopsided settlement so that I get the majority of the assets, and that I then give, Evan has a special needs trust set up, and there's money that goes into that trust on a regular basis. Excuse me. There's money that goes into a special needs trust that pays for the part of the assisted living that Medicaid wouldn't cover. So our expenses went from $10,000 a month to $2,000 a month.
So we have about 4 minutes left.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
I know. So I want to segue to what made you create Zinnia TV, because I'm sure this had to be a catalyst.
It was absolutely a catalyst. And when Evan was living in long-term care, in memory care, and he was no longer verbal, I watched him become incredibly distraught in front of the television, where I would enter the room and he'd be banging on his chest or he'd be screaming. That was one data point. Another data point is that I discovered that our connection was much more solid if we were looking at something together. So if he had been he loved hockey. So if I brought in a hockey glove or a hockey puck and he had something to hold and touch, or even just something to look at, a hockey magazine, we would have much more meaningful connections and conversations. And so I thought, how do I create a stream of visual content that is slow enough that he can absorb it, that doesn't have competing audio, because audio and video coming in at the same time at speeds intended for a regular brain don't work well for a person with dementia. And so that led to the creation of Zinnia TV.
I have seen episodes from Zinnia TV. They are absolutely phenomenal.
Thank
How
you.
did you come up with, okay, so we have about a minute left. How did you come up with the pace? How did you come up with well, go ahead, just talk about it.
Testing. I had been working, my work as a dementia educator led me to a job at the University of Washington in the Memory and Brain Wellness Center. Through that, I met researchers at the University of British Columbia. We were able to get into a research project that lasted 2 years, where we just iterated. We were testing content in long-term care communities. We were testing it at Vancouver General Hospital and in people's homes. And we were able to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And we landed on a really good model that has been vetted now with multiple research projects.
I have to say the impact that this has made. I shared it with one of my friends. They watched the one on sewing, and her mom, it was the first time she'd spoken in 6 months. So it really does have an impact on people. It is just an incredible product. And I want to thank you for sharing your journey with us today, Allyson.
Oh, thank you. I hope I didn't be too wordy, and that people actually got some good stuff out of it. I love chatting with you, Tracy. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Well, and thank you very much. And if this conversation moved you, visit the Dementia Home Care playlist for more episodes on our YouTube channel, USA Global TV and Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. I invite you to subscribe and explore other programs. You will find my book, Dementia Home Care, How to Prepare Before, During, and After on Amazon. You can reach me through my contact page at tracycramperkins.com. While there, sign up for my newsletter and receive your copy of 10 Steps to Calming Aggressive Dementia Behavior. This is Dementia Home Care, balancing care with peace of mind.
USA Global TV and Radio proudly presents Tracy Cram Perkins, a dementia caregiving survivor teaching how to balance care with peace of mind. #1 resource for dementia caregivers. It's the book Dementia Home Care, How to Prepare Before, During, and After. Over 17,000 copies sold of this must-have guide. And now a testimonial from Tracy Smith.
If I was to describe this book to someone who is going through a similar situation, I would underscore how important it is to have some sort of a tool or a guidebook to help you through certain stages. And there's so many, it's such an unknown topic to the average person. And to have this as a reference is essential. It's going to help you get through it personally, as well as help your loved one manage.
To learn more, go to tracycramperkins.com. Tracy Cram Perkins is an award-winning author. She's also the host of Dementia Home Care television show. Watch it here on USA Global TV and Radio. People are searching for experts every day. Are they finding you, or are they finding someone else? Every day, professionals are building authority through media. We've already built the platform. USA Global TV and Radio. Over 14,000 shows streamed to over 60 countries. This isn't about becoming famous. It's about leverage, visibility, credibility, opportunity. One interview, one conversation, one show, repurposed into content, connection, and business growth. Most people assume hosting a TV show requires a studio, a production team, and a massive budget. Our television packages begin at $1,500 US per month. Professional production, global distribution, replay visibility, built for voices with something to say. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, and if this resonates with you, we should talk. USA Global TV and Radio, all rights reserved. Contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.